Okay, there we go. All right. Welcome to Muscle Science for Women, a healthy aging series with your friends, Ashleigh and Beth. How you doing, Beth?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Is it warm where you are?
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like it's been warm where you are for a while. It's been warm where I am for a few hours and it's been great. I went for a walk this morning to get my iced coffee and I felt that baking sun on my face and it was just like there's nothing better. When you've been missing it for a while, there is nothing better.
And I know you especially
I
really
just
need that.
I need that sunshine. I was in San Diego recently, as you know, and
Yes.
it really was surprisingly not as hot and sunny. I mean, I know it was, it's early in the season, but I figured like Southern California, I'd be getting some like solid sun. And it really felt like I traveled completely across the continent to the exact same climate that I left because it's right on the ocean, right? So it was just like very,
Mm-hmm.
kind of foggy and overcast and that kind of cool ocean breeze. It did usually like burn off and then there was some sun and it was nice. Like it was pleasant. I'm not trying to be too complainy, but I just kind of expected. I'm like, yeah, Southern California, it's going to be hot and sunny the whole time.
Yeah.
Not quite.
We were there 2 Februarys ago,
Mm.
2 or 3 Februarys ago, and it was unseasonably warm in New York at that
Mm.
time. And
Mm-hmm.
it was actually warmer in New York than it was in
Crazy.
San Diego. And I
Yeah.
felt robbed. But it is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's beautiful there no matter what.
It was beautiful. And I was saying, I've mentioned this before, so people are going to be tired of it, but I just want to keep saying it for anyone from San Diego who's listening is I couldn't believe how nice everybody was. People were
Hmm.
so friendly and just looking you in the eye and giving you a smile and saying good morning and saying something cute about my kid. And I was just like, wow, you guys like, it must, maybe it's all the sunshiny weather on the ocean, but you're just like in a good mood all the time. It's great. It was very nice.
But
Anyway,
that wasn't your experience last time you were in Brooklyn?
listen, I'm actually a big advocate for the New York state of mind. Okay. I'm into
Hmm.
it. I find New Yorkers actually very friendly and funny and interesting people to talk
Hmm.
to. But it's
It's
probably not
different
the
though.
first thing people are going to say
Yeah.
is how friendly New Yorkers are. So, but
No, I know, I know. I
I,
always say like, we're nice, God damn it.
there you go. Exactly. And that's the kind of niceness that I really appreciate. So,
Hmm.
anyway, we are here to tackle a big topic in the series on healthy aging, which is nutrition. I mean, we're only going to be able to get so far in one conversation, but I thought it would be cool for us to just kind of dive into some sort of key points, hopefully give our listeners some good tangible takeaways and some food for thought, no pun intended, for maybe further research and some areas that they may want to look in a little bit deeper, because it is a very, I think, well, it's a big topic, it's a deep topic, and there's a lot of kind of layers to it, right? So we'll try to unpack some if we can, but maybe let's start with like a little bit maybe of an icebreaker here. And I'm going to ask you, and if I have any smart thoughts, I'll follow up, but how has your nutrition changed over maybe the last few decades as you've started to pay attention? Because I know we all kind of probably started in our young adult years not thinking about what we eat at all, and then we progress. But how has your kind of nutrition or approach to nutrition changed?
Well, I mean, for me, I sort of got lucky because my transition into paleo and then into carnivore-ish, shout out to
Mm-hmm.
our cookbook,
Yes.
happened at the same time that I was in my 40s and now I'm in my early 50s. So what my transition into what I think is an optimal diet for this stage of life also happened to kind of in tandem with what was happening kind of in the world of wellness and in my coverage as a journalist. So I kind of got lucky that the stars aligned in that way. But definitely before, maybe 10, 12 years ago, I was much more of a, quote unquote, traditional healthy eater. So I tried to have only vegetarian lunches. And I ate a lot of grains and beans. And I ate meat, but I didn't eat a lot of red meat. And, I did this elimination diet. I won't sort of tell the whole story again, but I always had stomach problems. And I did this elimination diet and found that grains and beans did not agree with me at all and transitioned away from those things. And that's kind of how I went paleo. And then in that process found that I was just craving meat more and more.
Mm.
I was working with a dietitian on this elimination diet. It was like a group thing. And I remember calling her and saying like, I don't know what to do because I'm craving meat a lot. And she was like, you should eat meat then.
Mhm.
Um, and I did, and I started eating more and more animal protein. And then I met this woman, Ashleigh Van Houten, and maybe you know her. But
She's like, eat
as
some heart.
well, it's funny because I was kind of on that track already,
Mhm.
and then it was almost like you gave me permission. Like I
Mhm.
wanted to do it. I felt like it was the right thing to do. It was what I needed. And then, and sort of like in our friendship and in all our conversations, it became clear that like, no, this is legitimate. This is not just like this thing I have to sort of do in secret. Like, no, this is a legitimate thing.
Mhm.
Um, and now I eat, animal protein's the center of my plate and I fill it in with other things. And I have a very varied diet. I like vegetables and fruit, so I eat them, but I eat very few kind of straight up starches beyond things like winter squash. And
Mhm.
as you know, I'm not a big potato
I was
person, but
gonna
like,
say we gotta just get that out there for anybody
yeah,
listening. Just
I
I know
know.
it sounds
Sorry.
nuts, but there are
I
people out
know.
there who don't like white potato,
It's not
and
that I don't like them. I just sort of don't
you're not
care.
interested.
Sweet,
Yeah,
sweet potato stew, I'm just not that interested.
that's fair. That's fair.
But I eat a lot of squash and I eat fruit and, but and rice too, like white rice. But in general, like I don't really do much like pasta and stuff like that. And when I do, it's usually like almond flour based. Um, so yeah, so I feel like I've just been very lucky that my sort of journey with nutrition has been along the lines of moving toward one that's more optimal for women in peri and postmenopause.
Hmm. It's interesting you mentioning like the elimination diet process and also kind of starting with paleo, which is where I started too. And I've been seeing some things online, which sometimes whenever I start a sentence like that, it makes me think like, just don't be online as much. That's the real answer. But I've been seeing some things online on social media, like people talking about nutrition and talking about how extreme and not good and unhealthy it is to follow any kind of diet that eliminates foods completely. And that's
Mhm.
usually in reference to carnivore or even paleo. People always like to, it's funny because I feel like paleo has kind of fallen off the like trend map a little bit. And maybe because it's so normalized now that people just eat that way and don't call it that anymore. And maybe it's because these more extreme, carnivore vegan stuff has kind of taken up people's attention more. But people always like to talk about how, paleo, it doesn't let you eat grains, for example, and that's extreme and that's
Mhm.
bad. And you can also say with like vegan or anything, but and I understand the idea of demonizing foods in many cases being bad. I understand extremely restrictive diets being unsustainable and not in the best interest for most people. But it is interesting how we immediately, it's more like we're just mad about being told what to do instead of kind of reflecting and thinking like we, the colloquial we, whatever, we cut out entire foods because they are bad for us personally, not because you're a bad person if you eat them or because they're inherently evil, bad foods. But if a food makes you feel like garbage, you should cut that food out of your diet 99 at
No,
least percent of the time. No, no, don't do
a
it.
hundred, no, a
I
hundred
thought you were going to
percent. And
say
I
no, no.
can't. No, 100%. And I can't tell you how many times. I mean, I've stopped doing this because I've just basically like it's stopped engaging with people on social media about
Yeah.
almost everything. But for a while, I was getting all these comments about like eliminating food groups as diet culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, see, the thing is, I didn't eliminate grains and beans because I'm trying to lose weight. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
trying to lose weight. I
Mm-hmm.
eliminated grains and beans because I had stomach problems for 4 decades that was
Mm-hmm.
cured when I stopped eating them.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
period, the end. I was thin before when I was eating them, and I'm
Yeah.
thin now. So
Yeah.
skinniness is not the issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
purely, and I recognize that that's not the case for everybody, that
Mm-hmm.
some people are eliminating food groups because they're in this like constant chase to lose weight. I
Mm-hmm.
totally sympathize with that. And
Mm-hmm.
I can see how it can be diet culture. But
Yeah.
just because it can be doesn't mean that it is. And the ultimate, Will Cole always says this, the ultimate form of self-respect is taking care of yourself in whatever form that takes. And for me, that meant giving up certain foods. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Yeah. On the other side of this, and we're kind of jumping around, we haven't really dove into the meat. I'm full of puns today. The meat is what we're going to talk about. I can't help it, but
I love it.
on the other side of this restriction conversation is, and I'd like to get your take on it. I was talking to Alex about this the other day, about the idea of it being a good thing for most of us with healthy, functioning digestive systems to kind of be striving for as much variety in our diets as possible for so many reasons, right? To make sure that we're trying to get like the full range of kind of micronutrients and vitamins and minerals. Because even if you're eating, a really, really nutrient dense diet, if you are only eating the same sort of 10 things over and over again, inevitably, unless it's literally like liver and oysters and I don't know, a couple other superfoods, you're probably missing out on some things, right? So
Mhm.
variety's good. And I just got this, I have this study pulled up and maybe I'll put it in the show notes. It's not maybe directly related to like the topic of nutrition and aging, but it's a it's a study in the journal Nature Mental Health, I think. And maybe that's not what it's called. I'll put the link in the show notes, but the title is called Association of Dietary Patterns with Brain Health from Behavioral, Neuroimaging, Biochemical, and Genetic Analyses. Okay, so that sounded really intense, but the premise,
Light reading.
yeah, a little light reading. It put, and it's one thing about the study is that it was a lot of people. It was like 18,000 people or something. It was a big study group, and they had people doing different diets. They had a vegetarian, a carnivore, a moderate. So I think sort of well-rounded, like high variety, and it was looking into like heightened instances of like mental health issues and depression and things like that. And you're probably not surprised to hear that the plant-based diet had the highest instances of these issues because again, as we know, if you're not eating animal protein, you are missing out on some really, really foundational nutrition. But the second highest was the meat only.
Hmm.
That's something that's pretty, I think, again, coming from the more meat-based world that we're coming from, that's a
Hmm.
compelling argument for moderation and for well-rounded diets and for not just eating one thing. And that's going back to this sort of extreme um, elimination, extreme kind of diets where you're only eating one or two things. That also isn't how human beings are supposed to eat. We're not really meant to eat that way. We're like goats, we're scavengers. We eat a ton of things. Our systems are able to eat a ton of different things. And for your
Hmm.
life enjoyment, for your well rounded health, for your pleasure, it just sort of makes sense to want to eat as much variety as possible. So yeah, are you
Hmm.
on board with that?
I am. And I think we're also designed like outwardly. I mean, what you're talking about, I think, is how we're designed inwardly to be
Mm-hmm.
able to deal with a lot of different types of foods. But if you think about it, if you've ever been in a situation traveling or whatever where you've had to eat like the same two or three things
Mm-hmm.
for a few days at a time, you get kind of sick of them. And I think that again is nature saying to us, this isn't what you want to be doing. You
Yeah.
need a more of a variety of things. And sometimes it happens, like there's nothing you can do.
Yep.
You just don't have food available to you. And so you have to be bored. But I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that we're designed to experience that food boredom
Mm-hmm.
because nature wants us to have a lot of different types of foods, nutrients, different nutrients, but also like if you think about the experience of chewing something that's really soft versus chewing something that's harder, like
Mm-hmm.
different enzymes are released. It's like our
Yeah.
whole bodies work better, I
Mm-hmm.
think, when we get more variety.
And to that point too, I think some people who may be listening, who there are people who are maybe a bit more rigid or controlled in how they eat because it gives them sort of more of a sense of safety and control when it's like, look, I know
Mhm.
exactly the calories, the macros, how it's going to affect me. This feels safe. I'm going to kind of eat the same things. Variety doesn't always have to be crazy adventurous. Like some of us really like that and like eating
Mhm.
quote unquote weird stuff or different stuff or stuff we've never tried before. But variety can also just mean if every day you eat like a protein and a non-starchy veg for dinner, just instead of it always being steak or chicken, it's like throw some pork in there or some game or some fish or some seafood, or and if it's usually sweet potato, maybe put some purple yams in there, put some white potato, like whatever. It can be within the
Mm-hmm.
same families. That doesn't It's not going to maybe dramatically impact the final outcome, but it is going to be some minor micronutrient things and some visual and taste and textural changes that could really kind of like improve your quality of life, I think.
Definitely. And even mixing up the spices.
Mm-hmm.
We think of spices as just this thing that makes our food taste great, and they do, but spices are also loaded with different types of nutrients. So, and, some have some and then others have others. So,
Mm-hmm.
if you can even just like, if you're just like, look, it has to be ground beef, okay, that's fine. But like today, put Italian seasoning on it, and tomorrow, put curry on it, and
Mm,
just keep mixing it up that way. And even
yeah.
then, that will have an impact as well.
Yep. Okay. So in this chat, we are talking about nutrition needs or maybe some general best practices for women as we carry on through our decades, and how those nutritional needs may or may not change. And it seems to me, in my experience and in my practice, one of the biggest kind of questions in this vein that comes up is someone who's saying, here is how I ate for 30 years. And then menopause comes and it suddenly doesn't work for me anymore. And by doesn't work, it may mean I've gained some weight, or I don't feel as well, or I'm just, achy, or things just aren't feeling as good, but I haven't changed anything about how I've eaten. And some of the people who are reaching out with this story, some of them, it's kind of a wide variety of how they've eaten. Sometimes it's very standard typical American diet, but like low calorie. We know what the answer is there. Sometimes it's people who have eaten pretty, whole foods, what we would consider a pretty good diet, and it just suddenly something isn't working. So where do we want to start with this? Like, should we maybe kind of base the conversation around some changes that may be worth looking at around perimenopause and menopause? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think also just acknowledging what you're saying, how real that is, that the foods that worked for you, no matter how, quote unquote, good of an eater you were before, some of those foods may not work for you anymore, or you may need to sort of switch around how you're doing it. Like, let's just acknowledge that that is something that happens, and it happens to most of us. So there's nothing wrong with you if things aren't working anymore and you have to switch it up. Our bodies are just different. They're different now than they were 10, 20 years ago. And it can be hard to sort of accept and acknowledge those changes. Like it's not easy, but it is very much a real thing. So it's definitely worth kind of just coming to terms with it and thinking about it as like, okay, I need to make this change. Just like if you were, a competitive marathon runner when you were 25, and now, maybe you still are. And if you are, God bless, but like
Mm,
maybe now, 10Ks or more your thing, or maybe you've given up running and you're more into swimming or whatever it is. Some of that might be as a result of the changes in your body, and that's okay.
mm-hmm. I feel like it's tough for some people too, because, and this is something we'll explore in another episode, but you know, perimenopause or menopause, they don't happen on, May 1st of your 48th year. It happens
Mhm.
gradually, and it fits and starts, and it's subtle until it's not, and whatever. So it doesn't line up with, I hit menopause at 50, and so I had to eat differently at 50. It's like it starts earlier or later and kind of generally, and you maybe make this tweak first and that tweak. Like it's not cut and dry, it's not black and white. And that's what makes people, of course, women especially, you question yourself personally, instead of this is something that's
Mhm.
happening to my body and it's a chemical hormonal thing. Instead, you think like, oh, I'm just going nuts and I am not doing a good enough job and I suck at this or whatever.
No, that's a really, really important point. And I think the first thing that people, especially women, think of is I need to restrict. I've gained some weight. I need to cut calories, or I need to stop eating as much. And it's just not the case. It's just that's not what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not what your body is telling you. And
Mm-hmm.
that can actually cause more harm than good. So, going to more and more HIIT classes and restricting your calories more and more is not going to get you the result that you want. And part of it has to do with just like, I'm not an expert in this, but the way I understand it is like when your hormones when you start to, your body starts to create fewer and fewer of the hormones, like basically your adrenals kind of take over. So if you tax your adrenals with like crazy HIIT classes and you're not fueling your body enough, like what's it going to do? It's going to panic and like hold on to fat. So you're not helping yourself. And, I think I said this before, but like if you think about it logically, it doesn't make sense that that would be the thing that nature would want you to do, right? Like you're getting older, and your body is aging. So does it really make sense that what you need to do is like push it
Work
harder?
harder.
Yeah, like that just doesn't seem like it sort of doesn't
Yeah.
seem like how nature would have us be.
It's
It
a good
seems like
point.
it would, so
And it may
I
also be
understand.
tied, it may also be tied up into this like identity thing that happens with people. And it's happening to all of us, kind of, I think, regardless of our age, because it's all subjective. We're all aging, whether we're 20 or 50 or whatever, where we think like, okay, I'm getting older, and that's scary, one. And also, I don't want to just give up because I'm getting older. I want to still be able to kick ass and work hard and challenge myself. So even people who aren't maybe so tightly addicted to this like overwork thing, like I'm a good example of this. I'm not trying to work any harder than I need to, but I also do have this sort of feeling that's, I think, tied into my identity as a fit person, where I don't want to be like, oh, well, just because I'm 40 or 50 or 60, that means I can't like work hard at the gym anymore, or I can't, do something that's really physically taxing. I don't want that. Right. And of course, there's balance,
Yeah,
right? It
and
doesn't mean you have to do
yeah,
HIIT every day. It just means that you have to approach it maybe slightly differently than you did
totally.
previously.
Yeah. I didn't mean to imply that you can't kick ass past a
No,
certain
I
age
listen,
because I
I
plan to
know
kick
you're doing
ass
it. Yeah.
forever
Yeah.
and in my
Yeah.
own way. And
Yeah.
every time I see like one of these like 70-year-old women and on Instagram who's like ripped, I'm like, yes, please.
I
So it's
know.
not that
I
you
love it.
can't, it's not that you can't kick ass and challenge yourself.
Right.
It's more along the lines of like, if things are not working for you the way you want them to, the answer may not be to push harder at the things you were doing. It just
Yeah.
means that you may need to switch gears and do something different. But by no means am I saying you should give up and like, well, that's just the way it goes. No way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So, a couple nutrition things. Let's talk about sort of the nuances about around what is inevitable about aging versus what is common but not normal versus what is not inevitable. So there are things about
Mhm.
aging that the mainstream understanding makes it kind of seem like this is synonymous with aging. So things like gaining weight, especially around your midsection, right?
Mhm.
Um, Slower sort of recovery response time to exercise or exertion of any kind. You're just kind of like, it takes you longer to warm up for exercise. It takes you longer to recover from a hard workout, things like that. Are these things, do you think, in your understanding, are they natural parts of aging? Or are they, and if so, is it something you still can mitigate, or is it not natural? Is it possible, if we're on top of it enough, that we don't necessarily have to deal with these things?
It's hard to say I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say like it's natural and you're fighting it, but I mean, there are certain things that are going to happen, like when when your body stops making estrogen, you know, certain changes are going to occur, but that doesn't mean that it's inevitable. Um, I mean, there's hormone replacement, which is a whole separate topic, but like even the way we eat, I mean, one thing that is actually inevitable is that we don't process protein as efficiently as we used to. Like that is part of the aging process. So that doesn't mean that we give up on having enough protein and having enough muscle. It means that we have to make sure we're really getting enough and that it's high quality protein. So that's an example of something that is natural, but is, very possible to mitigate.
Yeah.
And I think once you do all the things, um, once you sort of follow the advice that we're giving and that you see, you know, from menopause experts and aging experts, if you follow the advice and you really do the stuff, I think you'll find that like there's less of it. There's less, you know, accumulation of belly fat, and there's less, aches and pains, and not recovering from exercise and all of those things. So
Mhm.
yeah, they are things that happen when you age, but it doesn't mean that you're just like stuck with it and there's nothing you can do about it. Maybe you'll have more aches and pains now than you did when you were 20. That's just a fact of life, but there's degrees, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah, I think it's well, okay. So first of all, one thing, if we're gonna have like a list of like 3 or 5 takeaways from this episode, one of them is keep it high protein and possibly even higher than before. I think that's a very,
Mm-hmm.
again, across the board, generally speaking, maybe not for everybody, but for most, that's going to be a smart piece of advice. If you've always been a sort of 1 gram per basic pound of body weight, or per pound of lean body mass, that's definitely the great sort of starting point. And if you're starting to notice it's maybe not, you know, doing it anymore, like you're sore all the time, or you're gaining a little bit of weight, or your things aren't working as well as they are, maybe consider as a first kind of step eating more protein. And it doesn't have to be a huge amount. You don't have to go from 120 grams to 200, but maybe if you're 120 grams, maybe you go up to 145, 150 grams. Try that, see how that works. So that's kind of point one. I think that's like one of the tangible takeaways. The other sort of more esoteric takeaway is, this talking about the inevitabilities of aging and having to kind of, we're always trying to balance between like, yeah, like some things are sort of inevitable, but you don't want to talk about it in terms of fighting against something that's normal and natural. I think it's hard because again, we tend to look at things so black and white that we have a hard
Mm-hmm.
time admitting that things happen when your body ages. We do not look, act, feel, react the same at 80 as we do at 30. But we as a collective culture, and especially women, we are so scared of that. And we are so scared to admit it because maybe that we're admitting that we're old, and we're admitting we're not as good. We're admitting we're not as desirable, or we're past our prime, or whatever that whole thing is.
Mm-hmm.
There can be both, right? Like we can admit, I mean, it's, if you look at like the beauty culture, like my face is not going to look the same in 40 years as it did when I was 25. That is inevitable. You can eat well, and you can take care of your skin, and you can even get Botox every 3 months for the rest of your life. It's still going to age. It's still going to happen. And I think if we get more comfortable with admitting without using that as an excuse to just give up, right? It's like, maybe I am going to have a harder time recovering from hard workouts, and I'm going to have to do a longer warm up than I used to when I go out for my little 5K run or whatever. And it's okay to kind of acknowledge and feel that, and still be like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean I'm over the hill. It doesn't mean I'm done. It doesn't mean I should give up. It just means that time is passing and I need to make some adjustments with it, right? It's like two things can coexist, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's extremely wise. Um, and I think, you just touched on something that's really important to remember, which is that the acceptance of aging is a big part of it. Like just the sort of acknowledgement and acceptance of the fact that the years are passing and we are aging.
Mm-hmm.
And those things, the things that come along with that, our skin and, our recovery and all of these things, like it's all part of the process. And, um, what I always say is like, look, it beats the alternative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm aging, but like I'm happy to age rather than
Yep.
not be here. So,
Yep. Yep.
um, and what does it mean to be past your prime? Like, what does that really mean? What is your
Yeah.
prime? Like, I think you have to,
Mm-hmm.
once you like, it's like I'm 53, I'm post-menopause or whatever. But the fact is my daughter is 15 years old. So yeah, now I can't have a baby anymore, but I didn't want a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah. Yeah. If you're
so
measuring
there,
your prime by stuff that you are no longer even interested in, that's kind of a waste of
well,
your energy, isn't it?
well, right. And like, what does it
Yeah.
mean to be in your prime? Like, most of us are hopefully smarter than we were 10 years ago. Most of us probably, hopefully, have like more perspective on the world and more empathy and whatever else. Like, hopefully, we're all moving in the direction of becoming more enlightened or however you want to think about it. So you're more in your prime in that way, even if you're like less in your quote unquote prime, when you look in the mirror.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's trade-offs.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that also just goes back to sort of popular culture and how that can harm us, because when women's value is so heavily weighted in looking sexy and being young and hot, then yeah, it's easy to understand why people think your prime is 26, because
Mhm.
that's what we're taught to think is the most important thing about us. And that's why it's so important for women to, I don't know, have good communities and other women they can look up to, and lots of hobbies and lots of things they're passionate about, so that they know that there is so much more to life than being hot. Thank goodness.
Yeah,
Okay.
because you know what? Like if we stop being hot in our whatever 30s, 40s, that's a long time.
Not be hot and just be hanging
It's a
around.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I
So
think I
if that's
also,
your
yeah,
value,
yeah. But it's funny too. I also have noticed, we're going totally off topic again, but it's just
we
like we
are.
got to go where it goes.
Yeah.
But I've noticed even as I get older, and I feel like no, maybe not. I look at like the women that I look at and admire, even just for their physical attributes, are not 26-year-olds. And thank goodness. And
Mhm.
I feel like, to me, honestly, and no offense to the hot 26-year-olds out there, you're great, but you don't need my approval. But it it really makes me feel better. And I feel like maybe it's kind of a sign of my own mental health that I'm not doing that. Like I am looking at like the famous women or whatever that I admire, and I'm just like, and they're in their 50s, and I'm just like,
Mhm.
you're beautiful and I want to look like you. And that's good, because that's, and of course there's still like rich famous people with every
Right.
beauty resource at their disposal, but like it's
Right.
the more mature person that I'm looking at, instead of the person that I can never be again, because I am not that. And so striving
Mhm.
for something that is possible is, I think, better than striving for things that aren't, because they're behind you. Anyway, let's get back to
So
nutrition, or
to
not. Okay,
nutrition, I just
go
wanted
ahead.
to say about the protein thing that we were talking about before, about
Yes.
making sure you're getting enough,
Yes.
is make sure that it is quality protein. I mean, I
Yeah.
know this audience knows this,
Yeah.
um, but just among my peers, I can't tell you how many times I hear someone say, yeah, I know now I'm postmenopause, I really have to take care of myself. So I went vegan.
Mm,
And I mean, I always keep my mouth shut because unless somebody directly asks me, I'm not going to tell them what I think. It's none of my business. But that is not quality protein. It just isn't. Like, make sure that, I mean, it's not like you can't do it. You can do it. Certainly, you can get enough protein and enough complete protein as a vegan. It's just much harder, and much higher caloric and carb load than you would have with animal protein. So if animal protein is something that you are open to and willing to have, that is the way to go, and make
yeah.
sure you get plenty of it.
Yeah. Completely agree. Let's talk about, if we're talking about eating animal protein and eating more of it, which is our general recommendation. We're not doctors, but it's still what we think is a good idea.
Mhm.
There's also the kind of conversation about cholesterol and what that means as we age, and this sort of, again,
Mhm.
natural tendency for cholesterol to creep up when we enter menopause. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I've been reading a lot about this, because I feel like this comes up a lot, both with women postmenopause and also with people when they go on like lower carb diets and when they
Yeah.
up their meat, like all of that. So, again, we're not doctors, we're not offering medical advice, but my understanding is that as our production of estrogen slows and eventually stops, cholesterol rises. Um, and you kind of match that up with the fact that like a lot of women later in life suffer from heart disease, and it's easy to draw a line there, even though I don't think the line really is there.
Mm-hmm.
Because just we have societally, sort of made this connection between cholesterol and heart disease, which is very much being questioned by experts now.
Yeah.
So if you see your cholesterol creeping up, and again, I'm not telling you, not, I'm not your doctor, but like know that that is a thing that happens as you get to this age. So there are other things to look at aside from just the cholesterol numbers. I mean, I think, probably people listening to this already know that like just the numbers, just your
Right.
LDL, HDL doesn't really give you a lot of good information. So there's other things you can do. You can get an advanced lipid panel that tells you like the particle sizes and all of that for your cholesterol. But also there are other things to look at, like your triglycerides. And that's another marker in terms of your heart health, and also your inflammation. So where are you with inflammation? So if you look on a blood panel, it's the sort of acronym is HSCRP, which is C-reactive protein.
Yes.
So don't ask me to explain what any of that means, but that is something to look for on your blood panel. And you want that HSCRP to be below 1. And then triglycerides, I can't remember what triglycerides are, below 125, I think is the number, or 123. But so triglycerides and C-reactive protein are two other things you can look at if you find that your cholesterol is creeping up and it's worrying you. And ask your doctor about it, obviously, but
Okay. That's good. Just kind of, again, general information. If this is something that's relevant to you, like go and do more research. But that's also advice for younger people too. Because again, this happens, like you said, a lot of times. It happened to me when I went like much higher kind of red meat, animal protein. My cholesterol went up, and that also happened to coincide when I was the, by every other marker, fittest and healthiest I've ever been. So it's like it's
mhm.
one piece of the puzzle. If you have high cholesterol and a bunch of other like metabolic syndrome issues or other health complications, then we're kind of talking about something else. But in the
Mhm.
context of a very healthy body and lifestyle, otherwise, maybe not quite the thing to fear that we've been led to believe. You did
No, it's
touch
true.
on,
And
yeah, go
there's
ahead.
this connection between, we've all heard the sort of talk about like saturated fat and, eating too much saturated fat and cholesterol going up and all of that. But there's other factors involved. Like saturated fat in and of itself is not a problem. It's also like saturated fat in connection with sugar.
Right.
So that's just like one thing to think about. So, you look at a fast food meal, for example, and you see, and, people are like, oh, it's so high in cholesterol. But like the issue isn't just that the cholesterol is there or just that the saturated fat is there, it's what else is happening in that meal. So I just feel like it's just way more complicated than we're led to believe. We kind of think of cholesterol as this thing that's just like floating around in our bodies and clogging up our arteries, and that's just not how it works. And we do need some cholesterol. Cholesterol plays really important roles in our bodies. So thinking of it as like good or bad, I just feel like it's not helpful.
Yeah.
So, find out more, find out those other numbers, look if there are other ways to, if diet is a factor, just cutting meat is not really the thing that's going to help you most likely.
Mm-hmm. So, further to that, because you did mention the inflammation piece, and in addition to talking about things that we should be eating more of, we can talk about some things that across the board are probably good ideas to minimize and really think about as we get older too, because inflammation is another one of those. You can mitigate it. You don't have to be constantly inflamed and sore and messed up, but it does become more of a factor as we age. We just get inflamed easier, we stay inflamed longer. I mean, it is the whole thing, right? That you joke about. If you're like a lifelong gym rat like I am, you are 21 and you can like wander into a gym and like do your heavy deadlift in 2 minutes. And then maybe 2 decades later, the process is a bit more of a slow warm up, a slow burn, right? So things like you
Mm-hmm.
have to prime your body just isn't as ready to go at all times. And there's even like a hydration, sort of lubrication of the joints kind of issue that is changing too. So when you're younger, everything just kind of moves and things aren't creaky and things are sliding against each other nicely. And as you get older, these things just not necessarily moving at the same pace, right? Inflammation is a component of this. So we want to increasingly avoid inflammatory foods and eat anti-inflammatory foods. So a couple sort of thoughts that come to mind. I was doing some reading on with some people that I like to follow because of their nutrition information. One being Dr. Kate Shanahan, whom we know. She wrote a book
Hmm.
called Deep Nutrition. She's a family physician. She has degrees in biochemistry and genetics. Anyone who is listening that hasn't heard of Kate Shanahan, she's a good read, and she's very well respected in this field. And her big thing is seed oils, avoiding seed oils. Sugars is one we've all heard of. And again, sugars, that's a kind of a bigger conversation, because then you get into the like people saying fruit is sugar and fruit's going to kill you and fruit's bad. And it's like, there's obviously nuance here. Fruit has a lot of
Yeah.
other things that are good. I mean, no one's
Yeah.
getting, no one's dying or gaining 50 pounds eating only fruit. I mean, it's just, there's so many benefits to fruit. It's like a cost benefit analysis. The sugar in fruit is not going to be your problem. But
Sugar, well, the fruit also has tons of nutrients and fiber
fiber,
and
yes,
water.
yes.
So,
And it's
and
not
that's
hyper
why,
palatable. Like you're not going to eat
right,
an entire box of fruit the way some of us could eat a box of Oreos, right? I mean, it's like
right.
it's whole foods. That's not even a thing. I think
Yeah.
that's a very extreme and really honestly kind of I have disordered way of looking at food. If you're worried about the sugar from eating a couple servings of fruit a day, that's a problem. Um, but seed oils, I think, I mean, that's a that's a pretty well researched, pretty compelling argument against. And I think it's the pervasiveness of it that is really the problem. I mean, you go to Whole Foods and majority of the food at Whole Foods has seed oils, right? And we think of, I think
Hmm.
a lot of people think of Whole Foods as a paragon of like healthy options, and everything there is better because it's organic and more expensive. And you go to the hot bar and most of that's doused in canola, right? Um, but there's a
Hmm.
lot of research that we don't have to get into here, that it's pretty, again, compelling that seed oils are not good for us, contribute to inflammation a lot significantly. And because they are in everything, we are eating way more than maybe we have in previous generations, which is contributing to that whole omega-3 versus omega-6 ratio that's totally out of whack.
Hmm.
That's a problem. Which, again, on the other end, why we should maybe in some cases be supplementing with either omega-3s or eating really omega-3 rich foods, because they're really good for you. Um, but do you have anything to add to that? It just kind of like paying attention and just trying to really minimize seed oils wherever possible. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think what you just said, wherever possible, is the
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
I personally like, we don't eat in restaurants a ton, but like I love a good restaurant meal occasionally. And most of them cook with seed oils. I say that as someone who has worked in restaurants,
mm-hmm.
high-end restaurants. A lot of them use seed oils. Most of them use them for some, if not all, of the cooking. Maybe the dressings have olive oil or another kind of oil, but you're talking about seed oils. If you're eating in a restaurant and you're not getting everything steamed, which why would you do that?
Yeah.
So, um, so I don't think we should be giving up restaurant meals, but when
Quick
but
interjection
giving
though.
up,
Quick
yeah.
interjection. As a chef and as somebody who has worked in restaurants, what are your thoughts on? I don't do this personally, but what are your thoughts on, the really hardcore people who are like, hey, I'm paying you to make this steak and vegetables. Make it with butter, please. Whatever you normally make it with. What are your
I
thoughts?
mean,
Is that totally not okay to do, or what?
you can ask. I mean, certain things you can't cook with butter or olive oil. Like if you're cooking at a super high temperature, it's going to burn and then it's worse. Like olive oil, if you let it smoke,
Yeah.
that's worse.
Yeah.
So so if you want like if you're getting a steak and you want it seared at a super high temperature, no, they're not going to do it in butter because it's not going to taste good. Um, or in olive oil. So all this to say is like where you control the seed oils, try to avoid them. And that means don't cook with them at home. There are plenty of alternatives. And then when you're at Whole Foods or wherever you're shopping, look at the package and look at the ingredients. And a lot of those snack foods, my friend always says, like things that come in crinkly packets, those foods, which frankly we want to minimize anyway, a lot of them, even the healthy brands, have seed oils. So that's a great way to help you cut back on both seed oils and snack foods. Doesn't mean cut them out altogether. It doesn't mean you can never have potato chips again in your life. It just means be mindful of it. And some of those snack foods are made with things like avocado oil or olive oil. Certainly things like popcorn you can get now, like made with ghee or olive oil. But even even some of the other foods, other snack foods, you can find brands that are, made with avocado oil or olive oil. So
Mm.
look for that where you can. So avoid it wherever you can, but I wouldn't drive yourself crazy about every single time you come in contact with it. Let yourself enjoy a restaurant meal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I
So
think.
I agree with you. And again, it's like it goes back to this like make the best choices most of the time so that you create this resilient, robust body that allows you to go eat a seed oil laden, totally decadent meal every now and then and enjoy it and not
Hmm.
totally fall apart because you're healthy and your body is getting what it needs 90% of the time.
Yeah. Don't let
Um,
perfect be the enemy of good.
yeah. And so we're also looking at foods that are high in like polyphenols and antioxidants and things that are going to kind of combat some of the other inevitable stuff we're taking in that isn't so great. So things like oily fish, right? Delicious. Sardines. I did this post the other day. My family
It's,
just crushing oysters, mussels, sardines, all that delicious fishy small fish, right? If you like them, I
mhm.
mean, I get some of these things are strong tasting. Like I think I'm in the minority of people who love the taste of a canned smoked mussel. It's a strong flavor, but I love it. So if you're already like on board, great, easy. They're easy to find. They're cheap. You can get them in olive oil. Again, you don't have to get them in safflower or sunflower seed oil. For people who have a harder time with the flavors and the textures of these strong fish, like I get it. There's, that's what salmon's for and stuff like that. But like they're good. They're good and they're good
You can also mix it
options.
into things like anchovies. You
Yeah.
can mix anchovy. I mean, it's good. That's got that great umami flavor like
Delicious.
that.
Oh,
So just mix some anchovy into your salad dressing. You don't even have to know it's there. Just blend it.
so good.
There's definitely ways to do it. I mean, I love the smoked mussels too, but if you don't, mix it into something, make a stuffing out of it and
Mm,
stuff a vegetable with it, or stuff
yeah.
a pork loin with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so there's definitely ways to get it. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to eat it out of the can, although you certainly can. I wouldn't judge.
Yeah, it's definitely it is one of those things like similar to the liver story where it's like sometimes I just feel like I'm lucky because I have a palate that just like likes these super strong flavors because I can see even though I love them so much, I like talk to family or friends who are like looking at me in horror when I eat these things and I'm just like you're missing out. I feel bad for you. Like I understand that this registers as gross to you, but I just feel bad for you because it's so delicious. Anyway, okay.
But there's
Oily
ways to do it.
fish.
We've talked about this before. Like, you
Sure.
know, I keep a liver in my freezer and I microplane it, a few tablespoons into
Mm,
anytime I'm making anything with any sort of ground meat of any kind.
yes.
I just microplane a little liver in there. My kid eats it. She knows it's in there. I don't believe in hiding food for kids.
Mm-hmm.
You barely taste it. It makes things slightly richer, but I found some frozen bone marrow at my
Mm,
local butcher shop and I melt it a little bit and put it into another ground meat dish. So like there's ways to do it. Even if you don't like those strong flavors,
yeah.
there's ways to get these incredibly nutrient dense foods without, having to like choke it down, which I don't believe in doing because food is supposed to be delicious and fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And, the good news for people who aren't as naturally animal forward as we are is I tend to think of like the protein, the good quality protein being like the real heavy hitter where you're getting all these vitamins and minerals and also the essential amino acids, the building blocks of protein that you need, that you increasingly need to maintain muscle mass and health as you age. But some of these like when you're looking at like the polyphenols or the antioxidants or the like nice anti-inflammatory properties, a lot of that is coming from plant food. So if you're somebody who really likes those and really needs the greens in your diet and the like fruits and the vegetables, that's where you're getting it. Like berries are just like as superfood as a plant food can get, right? Avocado is a
Mhm.
really good one. Nuts for a lot of people. Nuts can be problematic for some people. A lot of that's in the preparation, but they can also be really good. Dark chocolate, guys. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, you know,
Magnesium's in there. Mhm.
yes, green veggies, like a lot of that stuff
Mhm.
is going to be really good. And again, it's sort of just like rounding out the diet that you're already eating. So ginger, I've
Yeah,
been really on a
absolutely.
ginger kick lately. What do you think about
Oh,
ginger?
I mean, ginger is one of my favorite things, and I am never without it. I love it. At Trader Joe's, they sell cubes of frozen frozen minced ginger, and it's
Mm.
the best. I'm not exaggerating. I think it is the best product they sell at Trader Joe's because
Wow. Okay.
you just pop out a cube and it's a teaspoon of ground ginger. It's the best.
Ha-
Um,
have you ever made your own like ginger beer or like ginger beverages?
so Mark, my husband Mark
Yes.
he has
Okay.
made like ginger kombucha and he's
Okay.
made ginger, like ginger ale sort of.
Okay. Okay.
I haven't because I it's not really my thing, but
Okay.
I mean, I love ginger ale, but it's too much sugar for me.
Yeah.
Um, but I love to cook with ginger
Okay.
and bake with it. I just
Mm.
love, and ginger's so good for you.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to say, I had this meal the other night and I'm still dreaming about it and I'm going to like salivate as I'm talking about it.
Ooh, okay.
Um, I was at this Greek restaurant with a friend of mine and I had a skirt steak salad, and the skirt steak was cooked so perfectly and marinated just very subtly. So it just had a lot of flavor, but it wasn't like all about the marinade. Like it just brought out the meat flavor, and it had a beautiful sear on it. And then the salad was greens, but then it also had like grilled zucchini and some grilled asparagus on it, and just like a really light citrusy dressing and some feta cheese.
Wow.
I mean, I want to eat that salad every day for the rest of my life. It was
Sounds
so
pretty good.
nourishing. I don't love like a lot of raw vegetables. It just doesn't sit well with me, but I do love vegetables. So this had like enough leafy greens that, was really nice and refreshing, but it had those cooked vegetables, which I do much better with. And
Mm-hmm.
then the steak and then the feta. I mean, it was just, and I finished and I felt like a
Yeah.
superhero.
Yeah. That intersection of like food that tastes really good and you also feel like hyper nourished after you eat it. Cause it's not that, that exists, but it isn't as effortless to find, maybe as some people think. Like a lot of times, let's be real. Again, super nutritious food isn't always hyper palatable, right? Like we're
Hmm.
talking liver, we're talking fruits and vegetables. They're fine, but like you're not just like, give it all to me forever for the rest of my life. But when you get, you know, piece of meat cooked well and vegetables either cooked or not properly and dressed properly and just like the perfect mix, and you're just like, I really loved that and I feel good after I ate it. That's the way it should
Hmm.
be, right?
Yes,
Mm.
that is the way it should be.
Okay. Maybe I'll talk to Mark because I have been literally since I was in San Diego. It's a weird, there are some like weird um I guess local things that you maybe people who have not spent a lot of time in Canada would be surprised by, but for for America being a country that is known for its food excess and for everything being having way too much sugar and way too much everything and the obesity epidemic and everything. Like America is like sort of the ground zero for that, honestly. The one thing that's really interesting is that America has iced tea and the baseline is not sweetened, right? You need to ask for
Hmm.
sweet tea most places. That's you if you
Not in the
get iced tea.
South, but yeah.
But if you get iced
Hmm.
tea, I mean, again, maybe some like packaged stuff, it's going to be sweetened, but like generally, iced tea is just not sweetened or not that sweet. And in Canada, you can't find unsweetened iced tea. That's like not a thing that exists. And
Oh,
a similar thing is ginger beer, like ginger drinks, which and ginger beer I love. Like I don't know if that's just like an island thing. It was very big in Bermuda. There's a couple brands that make really good ginger beer. You can kind of get it here, but it's always pretty much ginger ale. It's just sweet and sugary and it's not spicy. And like the good, like the Jamaican stuff or like the real authentic stuff is like spicy, like it'll make you cough. And but it
hmm.
also is so high sugar. And I just like, I love the flavor, but I don't want to drink 6 ounces of a beverage that has like 65 grams of sugar in it. It just makes me sad.
Yeah,
It's so hard to
yeah,
find. So there were I found a couple like in my, supermarket journeys while I was in the States, but I was like, I'm going to make this, I'm going to learn how to make it. And apparently, real ginger beer, there's a fermentation process that has to happen. So it's going to be kind of
right.
involved, but I'm willing to give it a shot because it just makes me feel so good. And ginger, getting back to again, the reason why we're here, ginger is a very healthy, high antioxidant, lovely thing to add to your food.
Anti-inflammatory,
Yes, big time.
anti-nausea, all of that. One thing I would wonder about, and again, I haven't made my own ginger ale or ginger beer, but I'm assuming that you would start with like a simple syrup, like a ginger
Yes.
syrup. I
Well, you
mean,
start with like ginger, chopped ginger, and then some sugar. You mix sugar
right,
with it. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. So if I like set out to make a lower sugar ginger ale with less sugar in it and more ginger flavor,
Hmm.
I probably would make that syrup super gingery.
Yeah.
So like whatever the sort of typical amount of ginger is, I would double or triple it
So you can use less of
and
the
let it
syrup.
right and let it
Mm.
sit longer
Yeah.
and then use less of it. Like that's how I would start. I have no idea if that would work, but that's how I would start.
Okay. I'll keep you posted on my
Okay, good,
experiments.
good.
Okay, so coming back to the anti-inflammatory thing. I mean, again, this is there's nothing new here. You can literally Google it and find it, but we're talking about spices and fruits and vegetables often that are very deeply
Mhm.
colored. That's usually a sign that it's like high in polyphenols, antioxidants, like richly colored fruits and vegetables. And then fatty fish and other kind of sources of fat like avocado and olive oil and nuts and things like that. These are all great additions to a diet, and you can again Google it, look at the list of anti-inflammatory foods and pick and choose, what works for you and what you want to add to your diet. But it's a another important takeaway. It's like the eat more protein and then really be thinking about your food in a way of like, is this adding to my inflammation or taking away from it? Because that stuff is going to
Mhm.
really just start to become more noticeable and more prevalent and more of an issue for us as we get older, right?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. The only thing I wanted to add was two things. One is to make sure you're getting plenty of fiber. And you'll get that naturally if you're eating those fruits and vegetables. Um, I know that people in the carnivore community would tell you like you don't need fiber, but everything I have read and all the experts I've listened to, they all talk about the importance of fiber.
mhm,
Um, so because fiber isn't just, I mean, you think of fiber as like elimination and it does help with that, but it's also one of the things that's going to feed the flora in
yes.
your gut, and that is
Yep.
super important. So make sure you're getting plenty of fiber. There's a crazy number. It's only like 4 or 5% of Americans get the recommended amount, which is like 25
That's
to 30
interesting.
grams. It's crazy. Like people just do not get enough fiber. So,
But again, is that
so
because like the biggest sources of fiber are fruits and vegetables and just like no one's eating those?
it's partially that, and it's partially the fact that people eat so much refined grain foods that are based in refined grains.
Yeah.
So, probably people listening to this show are not those people, um, but most of us are not getting enough fiber. So it's something to think about. I really like using chia seeds. Like I make jam out of them, and then you can use less sugar because you don't need the sugar to create the gel.
Mm,
Um, and also like I'll make like a high protein chia pudding to have like after a workout, which is great. And it's just like Greek yogurt,
mm-hmm,
protein powder. Sometimes I put pumpkin in it
mm-hmm,
or some fruit like a banana or whatever. And then chia seeds. And you really only need a little bit. It's so filling.
mm-hmm,
But it's a great way to get like a good amount of fiber really quickly. But yeah, just make sure that you're getting some fruits and vegetables, and that will help with fiber.
mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted to mention is like we spend a lot of time, you and I, but then people in general spend a lot of time talking about the macronutrients and all the nutrients on our plate and the selection of foods and all of that, all of which is really important. But another thing that really matters is your state of mind while you are eating,
Mm,
and making sure that you are not stressed when you sit down to eat. If there's everybody loves to talk about how great the Mediterranean diet is, and maybe it is, but like part of why it's so healthy there in those regions is because they sit down and they eat calmly and they eat in company of other people and it's a relaxed environment. Now that may not be available to you, and that's fine, but even just taking a couple of deep breaths before you start to eat so that your body is not in a state of fight or flight will make a huge difference in terms of how well your body absorbs the nutrients that you're eating. You can eat the most nutrient dense diet in the world, whatever that is. And if you're stressed out all the time, your body's not going to absorb those nutrients. Part of fight or flight is that your digestion shuts down.
mm-hmm.
So even just taking a really deep breath or two before you eat, letting yourself calm down, letting yourself eat slowly, that can make a huge difference no matter what's on your plate.
Getting your phone away from you while you're eating.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Really
Yeah.
hard to do, I know, for a lot of us,
Yeah.
because that's,
Mm-hmm.
again, a whole other conversation. We're all addicted to distraction, but it does
Mm-hmm.
make a big difference. Like it, and it doesn't take a scientist to understand that you're going to react to your food differently if you are sitting at a table, I don't know, maybe looking outside at nature and talking to a friend versus shoveling it in while you're hunched over your kitchen sink. We've all been there, but there's a difference. There's a difference in how your body's going to make use of that food and how you're going to feel. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and chewing properly and all of those things. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good
Yep.
point. That's a good
Yep.
point. I just recently actually bought for the first time ever. And it's like, it's so funny how, meathead me, I feel like a hippie buying it, but I just bought chia seeds for the purpose of trying to eat more like potentially sort of hydrating foods, like that whole,
Mm-hmm.
like that gel quality, like cucumbers, I think are another good example of a food
Yeah.
that's like that. But
96% water.
yeah, but like foods, because again, that's another one of my approaches to my skincare routine is I again, yet another rabbit hole, guys, but this is all relevant to aging. I learned kind of recently that I don't have dry skin, but I do tend towards dehydrated skin because I'm just not like drinking enough water. And those are two different things. Like I have oily, kind of thick skin, and so I always thought that was just
Mm-hmm.
going to kind of save me as I got older. And it is beneficial. Like it's in some ways better for aging than I guess having naturally dry skin. But you can have oily, thick combination skin and still be dehydrated if the foods you're eating or your diet isn't conducive to like deep hydration from within. So I'm like, all right, let me throw some chia seeds into my food and see what happens. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not certainly not harming anything. So we'll see if it makes any difference. But okay, next topic. Oh, geez, we're at an hour. Oh
I
man, we're
know.
we're
I
talking.
know. I
Okay,
just noticed that.
okay. Well, we are kind of getting to sort of the third main thing here, which is we're talking about. Well, we do have to touch on two things. Let's touch on quickly before we get into the micronutrient conversation. Let's touch on carbs because we did talk about protein. We're talking about healthy fats, which are always important. And we're not going to get into the granularity of like, once you hit 50, you should eat this many grams of fat or carbs. That's a bio individual question. That's maybe something for to work through with a coach or something. But we know that healthy fats, olive oils, avocado oils, fatty fish, high quality meat, all of those great fat sources. Protein is important. Carbs is, again, one of the most sort of fraught of the macronutrients. And I can understand how people will be confused too as we age, because one of the big conversations for premenopausal women is we're trying to pull women out of this uber low carb mindset of carbs make you fat. If you eat carbs, you're going to get fat. We want to have a nice, well rounded diet that is supporting our energy needs and the goals that we have. And carbs can be an excellent tool. They aren't as necessary for survival as the other two, but they can be very important. They can be important to our enjoyment of food, and they can really, really help with muscle growth, with physical, goals that we have. So carbs are
Energy.
important, energy, regulating our hormones, all of these things. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
this conversation of like, don't be scared of carbs, don't be scared of carbs. And then it's like we hit menopause and it's like, be careful of those carbs, so I can understand how people are like, here we go again, another thing that I have to be confused and I'm hearing different things and I'm not sure what's right. So, what are your kind of thoughts, or what have you learned about the carb conversation as we get into menopause?
Well, you and I have talked about this before, but I think we tend to get into this thing of like, if a little bit of something is good, then we have to have a lot of it.
Yeah.
And if too much of something is problematic, then you can't have any of it.
Right.
And both of those things are almost never true when you're talking about nutrition. And unfortunately, that's a nuance, and people don't like nuance. But the fact is, some carbs are better for you, more optimal than others. Notice I didn't say that any of them are bad, because I just don't think food is good or bad. There's food that's more or less optimal for you. Um, so in terms of carbs, I think, it's important to look through the lens of what is a balanced diet and what does a balanced diet look like for you. So, if you are someone who, tends to eat a lot of animal protein and wants to get lots of fruits and vegetables, the fact is you're not going to have a lot of space on your plate and in your, in your appetite
Yeah.
for a lot of refined carbs. So you are eating carbs because there's carbs in fruits and vegetables. Um, and any, if you're putting sauces on your food, like there's carbs in that. Um, but if you are not that way and you're kind of moving that way or whatever, if you're somebody who tends to like sit down to a plate of pasta, like then you're getting a lot of carbs and you're getting, kind of less optimal ones. So it can be just a question of kind of shifting your plate. But I think carbs fit into the conversation in the same way that all these other foods do. Like start at the center of your plate, which is your animal protein, and then fill in with other things. And sometimes those other things are going to be things like sweet potatoes and, winter squash, which is a vegetable, but one that's higher in carbs. And sometimes what's filling in your plate is going to be like asparagus and, you know, tomatoes and things that are like, yeah, things that are lower in carbs, but still have carbs, like lower, less starch, but still have carbs. And it's just a question of balancing those things and trying to kind of like, maybe especially as we age, limit the more simple carbs. So limit the rice and the pasta. And you don't have to give it up completely, but just kind of like be more mindful about it. And then, you know this about me, and certainly we're the same in this way. Like, I think there has to be room in your life for treats. Like, I just think there has to be.
Room for
Um,
treats is my motto.
I mean, I'm sorry, but like, I'm never giving that up. So,
Mhm.
with that in mind, it's just a question of like, kind of looking at the rest of your day. If you know that that's the day that you're going to have a brownie,
Mhm.
by all means, oh my God, have the brownie. But maybe that's not the day that you eat the sweet potato or the pasta or whatever. Maybe that's the day that you have the salad instead, and it all kind of balances out.
Mhm.
So, as much as you have control over that, there are going to be days you don't have control over it. And then it's just one day, and the next day you kind of like go back to normal.
Mhm.
But I think this is sort of a long answer to a short question, but I think with carbs, it's a question of like being mindful of what kind
Mhm.
they are, and moving toward the more nutrient dense ones, which is going to be the fruits and vegetables, and keeping in mind when you have the starchier ones and how much of the starchier ones you're eating.
Mhm.
But I don't think carbs are the devil, and I think we have to like get away from that way of thinking.
Mhm.
All of these foods that we're talking about serve a purpose, and if you're like sitting there looking at a cup of berries and going, "Oh my God, how many carbs are in this?"
Mhm.
Like that's not the conversation that you want to be having with yourself. Obviously, it's different if you're diabetic or you have,
Mhm.
some other issue. But for most of us, if you're looking at a cup of blueberries, you're fine.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
eat the blueberries.
Yeah.
But if it's a cup of, if it's a cup of spaghetti, then yeah, then that's something to sort of like balance out with the
Mhm.
rest of what you're eating and just be mindful.
Mhm. Yeah, I really like the approach of, like, again, looking at it like it's not terrible, it's not bad, it's not something to be scared of, but it's also not, doesn't, shouldn't probably be the focus of your diet. It's a supporting role. And again, maybe if you're an ultra endurance runner, although I have seen people who do that, fueling more with fat than carbs, I think that's an individual thing. But for most of us, to your point of, as we maybe are not trying to push our bodies to the limit every day, if you think of carbs as a supporting role that you use for fuel, and so maybe, you do some version of, it doesn't have to sound as formal as this, but the carb cycling thing. It's like on days when you're not moving that much, you probably don't need those carbs as much, as many carbs to fuel your needs for that day. As long as if you're consistently getting the protein that you need, which is the most important, great. That's the baseline. Then you're adding some healthy fats that are keeping your body running and good. And then if you're paying any attention to your calories, if you're kind of looking at that and thinking, okay, I'm about where I should be, but I need to sort of round it out a little bit. Okay, then add some carbs as per your preference and your energy requirements for that day and whatever you've got going on. And it's also, when you're thinking about, if you're thinking about fat loss, if you're thinking about muscle maintenance, if you're thinking about all these things, it's also a good reminder that we're talking about trends. We're talking about averages. We're not talking about one day, which is why it
Mhm.
is true that the brownie doesn't matter. The brownie doesn't matter. If you're eating brownies and spaghetti every day for months, that matters. If you're never eating carbs for months, that matters. But it's the over time, are you paying attention? Are you paying attention to your body and your needs and how it's responding to things? And you know kind of what your exercise routine is like from a week to week basis. I've got a heavy leg day. Maybe that's the day I'm going to eat the brownie. I'm going to need some extra carbs and some morale. So there we go. Two birds with one stone. But over time, it's like, you just pay attention. And that's the problem with treats, as much as you and I love them, is they creep in, right? It's like the things that you don't actually need, even for morale, but certainly not for energy. But you've got a coffee date, and then you're going out to dinner, and then you had a hard day, and then it's like, and then these things creep up, and then it becomes a problem. It's not a judgment call. It's not a you're terrible and you're weak. It's just that they're very delicious and they're very easy to eat. And if you have goals around how you want to feel and how you want to look, carbs are kind of the thing you really want to pay attention to, because you can manipulate those more for your benefit. And at the end of the day, they are not as important as the other two things. So they're the thing you play with
Yeah.
the most.
I mean, I think also, just to sort of talk about fiber again, like if you are focused on getting the fiber that you need, you're getting your fiber from carbs.
Mm-hmm.
So you're automatically, if you are pushing yourself toward getting the fiber you need, you're automatically going toward higher quality carbs.
Right.
So that's another way to look at it. Instead of like thinking I have to count all my carbs, you can also look at it as like, I want to get to that 25 or 30 grams of fiber. What foods are going to get me there? And those are going to be just naturally going to be the more nutrient dense carbs.
Right. Okay. So let's finish off this conversation with a talk about, we've talked a lot about macronutrients and sort of general rules, maybe, or guidelines to look at. Micronutrients, so things like, again, vitamins and minerals that our body requires and that we must take in, because some of these things our body can make, a lot of these important things it cannot. We have to take it exogenously through either whole foods or the sun or supplements or some combination of the above. And if we wanted to get into kind of all of these, this podcast would be 10 hours long. So I think what we can do is kind of touch on a couple of the big ones and some things for you to think about and look at, and also acknowledging that some of this is going to be individual based on your diet, where you live, any sort of pre-existing conditions where you may not be
or medications that you're
that may
taking.
impact how you can sort of metabolize or absorb these things. So that's why your own kind of personalized like blood testing and getting these things checked regularly, because you are going to have maybe a different requirement than I do or than the average person does. But in my research, in my experience, a couple things keep coming up over and over again, and the two biggest ones that come up are vitamin D and magnesium. And
something like 85% of people or something like that are magnesium deficient in the US.
Huge. Most
it's huge.
I actually would love, I should get some testing done, because I'd love to see if I am one of the lucky minority that isn't deficient in magnesium, because I have really focused on magnesium supplementation over the last few years. And I would love to think that I'm doing good, but I'd be interested to see, because that's another one of those that we were talking offline, that it's really hard to get enough from your diet. And then there's also
that's almost impossible.
Right. And there's also
because of soil depletion.
The intricacies of like some of these vitamins, they work synergistically together. And so if you don't have enough of one, you could be eating or taking in enough of the other one, but it's still not absorbing properly. Like there's so much kind of going on there. But Rhonda Patrick, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's kind of a big name, a PhD in biomedical science. She has a very, very technical, nerdy, but if you're that sort, very useful podcast. And she mentioned a study that linked vitamin D and magnesium, and to maintain healthy levels of vitamin D, which as we know is very important. And most of us not living in the direct sunlight year round are not getting enough of it. Even if your vitamin D intake is sufficient, if you're supplementing with, 600 to 1,000 plus IUs a day, if you are magnesium deficient, your body may not be utilizing the vitamin D properly. So these two are ones that are both very, very common to be deficient in, and also linked together in how they work. So those would be two. And I talk to, a lot of my clients a lot, and I am not prescribing, recommending directly anything to anyone, but those are the two biggest like exogenous supplements that I tend to recommend to people, because the chances are really good that you need it. And also generally, if you're supplementing within regular sort of amounts, cyclically or whatever, you're not going to overdo it. You're not going to
Right.
hurt yourself,
Yeah.
because there are conversations about things like vitamin A toxicity, iron toxicity and stuff,
Niacin.
niacin, which are almost always a result of supplementation versus food.
Hmm.
Because the big one I get all the time is like, if you eat so much liver, you're going to get vitamin A toxicity. And it's like, you'd have to be the biggest liver fan on the planet to get enough vitamin A that it's going to be toxic from liver, because you're just not eating enough of it. You'd have to eat so much. But if you're supplementing with iron, if you're supplementing with vitamin A, things like that, it can potentially be problematic. But I haven't really
Yeah.
seen much as far as that goes with magnesium or vitamin D. I don't think there's people sort of overdoing it really in that department. But those are really, really important ones. Is there anything that you can think of to add to that?
Well, I just want to say the reason why we're also magnesium deficient is because of soil depletion. Like there's just fewer minerals in the soil. So that's why so many people are magnesium deficient, or one of the reasons why. The other pairing that I think people should know about is calcium and vitamin K2,
Okay.
because there's tons of calcium supplements out there. And then, women, especially as we age, we're told to, worry about our bones. I mean, certainly if you eat a lot of meat, that should be less of an issue. But if calcium is if calcium is a concern for you, make sure that you are taking it with K2. Otherwise, it doesn't work the way it's supposed. Like it's not going to do what you want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it can actually be harmful.
Okay.
So, obviously not prescribing, talk to your doctor, but those are, and sometimes you see them together. Sometimes you see supplements that have them together,
Right.
but oftentimes you don't. Oftentimes it's just straight calcium and you really need K2 with that.
Okay. Uh, Vitamin D helps protect older adults from osteoporosis. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
bone density thing. So that's obviously
Mm-hmm.
important. We're talking about aging.
Yeah.
Magnesium
Also in
is
fatty fish, vitamin D is in fatty fish.
magnesium is involved in the regulation of blood pressure and cholesterol production. So these are also issues that come up increasingly as we get older. It's like these things are obviously linked. None of us have enough of them. We don't have enough of them for decades. Then we get older and these issues start to pile up. It's also, I think, pretty widely known that like the best way to absorb vitamin D is through the sun, which is
Yeah,
interesting.
but for most of us,
We
you're not
can't
going to
do it.
get, if you're not close to the equator, it's almost impossible to get all of your vitamin D from the sun.
Certainly year
So
round, like in the summer,
yeah,
take advantage, like go out and get some vitamin D and your
yeah.
body can
I'm not
store it.
telling you not to go out in the sun.
Yeah.
Sunlight is great for you on a number of levels,
Yeah.
but just, I had a friend
Most of
who
us are not
was,
so lucky.
no, and he found out he was deficient in B12 and vitamin D. And he was like, oh, I'll just get vitamin D from the sun. And I was like, dude, you live in New York City. Like, that's not
Good
happening.
luck. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Also, magnesium is, I think it's 300 functions of the body
Yeah. Huge.
rely
It
on
does
magnesium.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And it also can help you. It's not a sedative, but it also can help relax your muscles and help with sleep. So, magnesium is super important and great for so many things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why I started taking it, was to try to like calm me down and help me sleep better. I think it's glycinate that's supposed to be the good one for sleep. There are a bunch of
Yeah.
different forms of magnesium, and there are some supplements. There's one that I take that if you're interested, you can kind of reach out to me directly. I can tell you about it, but it has
Mhm.
7 forms of magnesium. So it's kind of one of those like heavy hitters. It's like whatever you need, we got you. But there are some that, may impact different things. So if you have specific
Right.
challenges, there's going to be magnesium that's more directly suited for it. But I think
Right,
it
like
is one
some
of,
is digestion and
yep,
like
yep.
milk of magnesia is magnesium,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't want to take that if you want to sleep.
Right.
So I think you and I probably take the same magnesium supplement.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the one that's broad spectrum.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good one.
But yeah, and I mean, there are probably a ton more. And, I mentioned the omega-3 fatty acids thing. That's like, that could be a whole other podcast, because there is a lot of talk about how like omega-3, like fish oil supplements, that's kind of a tough area, because a lot of these supplements are just not good quality. A lot of the
Mhm.
products, like the processing involved and like the age and the quality of the stuff just isn't good. It's not giving you what you think it's giving you. So there's maybe some deeper research that needs to be done around that if you're trying to supplement with an omega-3, like a fish oil supplement. It's not to say that there aren't good options out there, but a lot of them maybe are not. But
eat your fatty fish.
Eat your fatty fish. Eat your fatty fish.
So good anyway. Yeah.
Get out in the
Salmon,
sun.
trout,
eat some chocolate.
mackerel. Yeah.
And then also probably supplement as well.
Yeah.
But that's, I guess, probably the big takeaway from like the micronutrient part is, and I just find it amazing when you really kind of sit down and think about it. There's a massive list of these vitamins and minerals that our body requires to run, and we take for granted that our body is just humming along like behind the scenes doing all these things. And then all of a sudden, when we can't sleep, or we're sore all the time, or we're anxious, and of course there can be so many reasons for these symptoms, but it could also literally be I'm low in magnesium. It could be one little micronutrient that we are not thinking about, that we take for granted, that is just our body's depleted and it needs it. So it's a really worthwhile thing, and it can be expensive or inconvenient in some places to do this, but it's really worthwhile to get these things checked and tested and see, because you just don't know. And don't waste your money on a vitamin D supplement if you are one of those people who's doing good, but you don't know unless you test it. So yeah, it's worth doing, because it really could, like, you could literally be having symptoms that make you feel like you're having panic attacks, or that you can't sleep, or that like really life altering things that could be drastically improved by simply changing your diet or adding a supplement. It's really incredible. So again, knowledge is power cliche really comes into play here. Like, figure it out and then supplement accordingly.
Yeah.
All right. We fixed it. Nutrition's easy. You know, I don't know. Is there anything else? Is there any like sign offs or anything else you think people should know before we end this conversation?
No, except that feel free to reach out to either or both of us if we can answer questions, or, you know, both of us share tons of recipes and other information on social media. So lots of free resources there. So please, you know, don't be shy about reaching out if you have a question. I may not know the answer, but if I don't, I will say, I don't know the answer to that, and I will hopefully point you in the right direction. I hope it's helpful.
I send your recipes to my clients all the time because you have a lot of good ones. So I do that. And
Thank you.
Again, shameless plug at the end of this. We wrote a cookbook together. It's called Carnivore-ish. It's right here. And if you are thinking like, maybe I do want to change the composition of my plate a little bit. Maybe I do want to make it a little bit more animal protein forward but still well-rounded and get some variety, and I'm feeling a little stuck or a little bored. That's a great resource. It's a big book. There's a lot of recipes. There's something for everyone, truly. And it's also educational, right? We talk about how to stock your pantry. We talk about what utensils to have. We talk about food prep. We talk about all that stuff. So it's a really great resource for people who are just like, I just want to like learn a little bit more and try some things and not be intimidated and have a good time and be nourished. That's the book for you. So go get that book. Yeah. All right. Until next time. Thanks, Beth. You're awesome. This was fun.
Thank you.
Feel good about it. Let's go eat some chocolate.
Let's do it.
All right. And bye.